Hello there, welcome to Planet America. I'm John Barron.
And I'm Licciardello.
This week, guilty as charged. The president's son, Hunter Biden, facing possibly years behind bars after his conviction on firearms offences.
We're going to get expert reaction from a former federal prosecutor and all the fallout from that other guilty verdict in the Trump trial. But first...
And first this week is to the trial of the president's son, Hunter Biden, charged with 3 federal firearms offences. Earlier today, the verdict.
Hunter Biden is the first son or daughter of a sitting president to be convicted of a crime.
The jury in his federal gun trial returned a verdict in just 3 hours. They found him guilty on all 3 felony charges.
The president's youngest son was accused of illegally buying a handgun in 2018 while he was addicted to crack cocaine. He's written a book about his descent into drug and alcohol abuse following the death of his brother Beau in 2015. His defence team argued that Hunter Biden did not consider himself an addict when he bought the gun and checked no on a form that asked whether he was an unlawful user of drugs or addicted to them. While prosecutors didn't produce a witness who saw Biden taking drugs during the 11-day period he owned the unloaded gun before his then-partner threw it away in a bin at a supermarket, they produced plenty of evidence that he was taking drugs for years, and that around that time the family and his friends were deeply concerned about his behaviour. Prosecuting attorney Derek Hines telling the jury in closing statements yesterday that if the trial evidence does not show that Biden was a crack addict in 2018 when he bought the revolver, then no one is a crack addict. It has been a harrowing trial for the Biden family. Hunter Biden's former wife and several romantic partners all took the stand. His daughter Naomi was the only defence witness. She testified her father had been at a rehabilitation facility at around the time of the gun purchase and told the jury he seemed great, he seemed hopeful. But her support for her father soon unravelled. Naomi Biden was asked about a text message from her father in October 2018 trying to arrange to get a truck he'd lent her back. The text was sent by Hunter Biden at 2 a.m. Right now, Naomi responded. The prosecutor asked her, "Do you know what your father was doing at 2 o'clock in the morning and why he was asking you for the car then?" She said, "No." But then the prosecutor read her text message in response. "I'm really sorry, Dad, I can't take this." The inference there was very clear. He was taking drugs, and the jury agreed. Hunter's stepmother, First Lady Jill Biden, has been in court most days, apart from when she travelled to France for a state visit with the president. But the verdict came so quickly after just about 3 hours deliberation that she and other members of the Biden family were unable to get through the court security screening to get into the courtroom to hear the jury's decision.
Look, that's probably just as well, because last week on Fox News, the drinking person's Judge Judy, Janine Pirro, was concerned that Jill Biden was trying to influence that Delaware jury.
It's kind of interesting that Jill Biden went in during jury selection. You know, it's kind of like a mob tactic to kind of stare down the jury.
Yeah, kinda. And according to Fox's sort of funny man, Greg Gutfeld, the Biden's mafioso tactics did not end there.
So now Dad and his son are suddenly taking long bike rides together. But that photo is a message. It's Delaware for, remember, jurors, I'm the president and I can always call the IRS.
Yeah, I'm not sure this is the kind of bikie gang that's going to intimidate the jurors, John.
Well, I don't know, Joe could fall off his bike onto somebody. After the guilty verdict, Special Counsel David Weiss defended his decision to bring the charges against Hunter Biden.
No one in this country is above the law. Everyone must be accountable for their actions, even this defendant. However, Hunter Biden should be no more accountable than any other citizen convicted of this same conduct.
A message perhaps there to the sentencing judge.
Well, to be fair to Weiss, he did offer Hunter a plea deal last year where Hunter would have to plead guilty to 2 misdemeanor tax charges and then admit to illegally possessing a firearm while being a drug user, and then he would have likely avoided jail time. But the judge's poking around revealed that the prosecution and defence didn't actually agree on what the terms of that deal were. The defence thought it involved a broad grant of immunity for anything related to Hunter's business affairs between 2016 and 2019, but the prosecutors did not agree. In the end, Weiss did reportedly offer another plea deal, which preserved the core of the deal hammered out from before, but without the broad immunity guarantee for Hunter's business affairs. But Hunter's lawyers supposedly rejected that. So look, if that's all true, and we don't know, but if it was, then it was Hunter's choice to face these charges.
Yeah, but now that Hunter Biden has been convicted, question is, where does that leave his father? The President of the United States has the power to pardon anyone, including his own son, and even commute a sentence. President Biden, though, says he is not considering a pardon.
But let me ask you, will you accept the jury's outcome, their verdict, no matter what it is?
Yes.
And have you ruled out a pardon for your son?
Yes.
For more, we're joined by Ankush Khardori. He's a former federal prosecutor with the US Justice Department. These days, he's a senior writer at Politico magazine, covering cases including the Hunter Biden trial. Ankush, welcome to Planet America.
Thanks for having me.
So was this basically an inevitable verdict, do you think?
Pretty much. The evidence was fairly strong. Charges were relatively straightforward. There weren't really pretty robust lines of defense, so I was not surprised that the result was a conviction on all counts.
So what do you think of this trial? Were you happy with how the judge, the defense, and the prosecution all conducted themselves?
No, I was not, actually. I thought the defense did their job, a challenging job under the circumstances, giving the facts, but I thought they comported themselves fine. I thought the judge oversaw the trial fine, but this is the same judge who also effectively blew up a proposed plea agreement that would have headed off this trial. That deal I thought was a very sound deal. She did not seem to like it and sort of scuttled it. And then the prosecutors, they brought a case that I think probably should not have been brought and prosecuted in some ways, and I thought some rather unseemly ways. So they got their conviction. I'm sure they can consider it that a win on their scorecard, but I don't.
Ankush, can you elaborate a little bit on what you found unseemly about the way the prosecution conducted themselves during this trial?
After the opening arguments, the government put on its first witness, and their first witness was an FBI agent who put into evidence Hunter Biden's book, which was literally the first exhibit that was introduced to evidence in this case was Hunter Biden's own book. And then the government proceeded to play 70 minutes of excerpts from Hunter Biden reading the audiobook version of his book, which is a very raw and evocative account of his time battling substance abuse and drug addiction, addicted, relapsing off and on over the course of years. And I found it very strange and I think quite unseemly. And I have to be honest, I never would have done it myself as a prosecutor, for the government to effectively use the memoir of a recovered drug addict against them in a criminal prosecution. There's something very odd about that. And then, after that, what the government then proceeded to do was put on sort of several witnesses, including his former romantic partners and his ex-wife, who were basically just sort of elaborating on aspects of the book. So what it seemed like to me is basically the government had his book. They decided they were going to prosecute him on the basis of along these charges, and then they just went and sort of shored up a bunch of witnesses from the book. I don't think that is a particularly impressive prosecutorial feat. I don't respect it, but this had all the hallmarks, quite honestly, at times, of an effort to humiliate the president and the president's family, and that is what they proceeded to do over several days.
I know some have argued that this case only ever went to trial because Hunter Biden is the son of the President of the United States. What do you think?
Well, look, 2 points. One is he's still facing charges in a separate case in California on tax fraud. So, he is facing additional charges above and beyond just these gun charges. And then I second on that particular point, this notion that there was a criminal case that could have been built up around his work with foreign governments and foreign entities. Those cases are much harder to bring and to successfully prosecute in the U.S. than people believe. In fact, the Justice Department has stumbled in this area in recent years, bringing cases that have not resulted in successful results. And so, the notion that Hunter Biden could have been charged under a theory like that always struck me as somewhat dubious. It's been nearly a year since people raised those concerns, and the Justice Department does not appear from outward appearances to be headed towards any charges along those lines.
Joe Biden has made it clear that he does not intend to pardon his son. But I wonder, do you think he might revisit that, particularly if he were to lose the election? He'd have nothing to lose, and he would be wanting to do everything he possibly could to keep his sole surviving son out of jail.
Look, I do think it's something that he might revisit, and so I wouldn't rule it out. The president was recently asked whether he would pardon his son. This was before the conviction, obviously, and he said no. However, a question that he did not get and did not answer is whether or not he would commute his son's sentence. So that is distinct from a pardon. Means you just basically wipe out the conviction and any sentence. Under our system, however, you can commute the sentence as the president as well, which means you leave their conviction intact, but you essentially wipe the punishment, so that if the defendant was in prison at the time, they go free. He wasn't asked about commutation as opposed to a pardon. I'm sure he will get that question at some point. But the upshot is that I do think that this is something that he could very well reconsider after the election, as you point out, particularly if he loses, at which point he kind of has a lot less sort of political skin in the game.
Ankush Khardori, thank you for being with us on Planet America.
Thanks for having me.
Meanwhile, another convicted felon, former President Donald Trump, who's awaiting sentencing after being found guilty in his New York business records trial, he's set for a probation interview this week. Trump is facing anywhere up to 4 years in prison when he's sentenced by the judge, Juan Merchan, next month, although probation is a lot more likely. All criminals awaiting sentencing have to meet with a probation officer who'll ask them about their social and criminal history, financial resources, history of mental health, physical or addiction issues, as well as to assess his living situation, all to assist with the judge's decision-making in the sentencing process. Well, Trump's interview was conducted via a video link from Mar-a-Lago to avoid disrupting the parole hearings of other criminals in New York.
And for those writing this sentence, we should note that unless you're a second felony offender, which Trump is not, New York recommends all sentences be less than 1 year, which once again would likely push Trump's sentence into the probation or less zone. But we shall see about that.
We shall indeed. Trump did sit down for a face-to-face interview with TV psychologist Dr. Phil McGraw, who was trying to convince the former president not now to seek to get revenge.
You have so much to do, you don't have time to get even. You only have time to get right.
Well, revenge does take time, I will say that.
It does.
And sometimes revenge can be justified, Phil. I have to be honest. You know, sometimes it can.
I think he's going to need another appointment next week, Dr. Phil.
There, look, Fox News tried to get Trump to rule out retribution as well. They also had uninspiring results.
But focus on those that want people to believe that you want retribution.
Number one, they're wrong. It has to stop, because otherwise we're not going to have a country. Look, when this election is over, based on what they've done, I would have every right to go after them. And it's easy because it's Joe Biden.
You've said, no, my revenge is going to be success for America. You've just had this verdict. Yeah. Do you still feel the same? What's your thoughts on that?
It's a really tough question in one way, because these are bad people. These people are sick. And I say it and it sounds beautiful, right? You know, my revenge will be success. And I mean that. But it's awfully hard when you see what they've done. These people are so evil.
So he seems unwilling to rule out revenge. Now, Republicans have noted that that's just Trump venting under pressure. Remember after the Access Hollywood tapes back in 2016? He did this before.
But if I win, I am going to instruct my Attorney General to get a special prosecutor to look into your situation.
It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Yeah, because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
He didn't charge her. And then 4 years later, when Trump was under the pump from the pandemic, he was temporarily all about Obama-gate. Which, in case you don't remember...
It was the greatest political crime in the history of our country. If I were a Democrat instead of a Republican, I think everybody would have been in jail a long time ago, and I'm talking with 50-year sentences.
Well, it is the biggest
and people should be going to jail for this stuff, and hopefully a lot of people are going to have to pay. This was all Obama. This was all Biden. These people were corrupt. The whole thing was corrupt, and we caught them. We caught them.
Okay, so if he didn't jail his opponents before, then why would he do it now? After all, this is what he says now about prosecuting Hillary.
After we won against Hillary, people would say, lock her up, lock her up. And I said, wouldn't it be terrible if I locked up the wife of the President of the United States, former, and locked up the former Secretary of State? It's a terrible thing. You know, you're starting off, you want to bring the country together. I want to bring the country together.
He just wants to bring the country together. But the Mueller report revealed that when in power, Trump actually did try to gain retribution. He called Jeff Sessions at home in 2017. He wanted Jeff Sessions to order the prosecution of Hillary Clinton. Sessions declined to act, but months later, Trump was still at him, telling Sessions he believed the Justice Department was failing to investigate people who truly deserve scrutiny, people like Hillary Clinton. And then 6 months later, in 2018, Trump told his White House counsel that he wanted to order the Justice Department to prosecute Hillary Clinton and James Comey. But the White House counsel Don McGahn rebuffed him and had lawyers warn Trump that if he asked DOJ to investigate his rivals, he could possibly be impeached. So in summary, Trump actually did try to get retribution in his first term. The only thing that stopped him was the staff he had in place. So next time round, who do you think the staff is going to be there? One of the favourites to be made Attorney General is this guy, Mike Davis. And this is what he had to say about Trump's conviction last week.
Dear Republicans, if your response to Biden's Republic-ending lawfare against Trump is 1, we must respect the process, and/or 2, we are too principled to retaliate, please do 2 things. 1, f*** off. 2, leave the party. You are too weak, stupid, and dangerous to keep around.
In other words, John, I think revenge is a legitimate concern.
Yeah, that guy sounds perfect. Meanwhile, the Republican Party is reportedly planning contingencies in the event that former President Trump is incarcerated after his sentencing next month. There's even chatter of Trump maybe recording some kind of video in advance just in case. Although spokesman Stephen Chung vowed that nothing will stop President Trump from accepting the nomination in Milwaukee as planned. Whatever that means, maybe it's going to be a jailbreak.
Mind-bending moral dilemmas with Donald J. Trump.
I went to a boat company in South Carolina. I said, how is it? He said, it's a problem, sir. They want us to make all electric boats. So I said, let me ask you a question. Do I get electrocuted? If the boat is sinking, water goes over the battery, the boat is sinking, do I stay on top of the boat and get electrocuted? Or do I jump over by the shark and not get electrocuted? Because I will tell you, he didn't know the answer. He said, you know, nobody's ever asked me that question. I said, I think it's a good question.
President Biden travelled to France this week to mark 80 years since the Allied invasion of Normandy on D-Day, and with him some of the few surviving members of America's greatest generation.
They knew, beyond any doubt, there are things that are worth fighting and dying for. Freedom is worth it. Democracy is worth it. America's worth it. The world is worth it. Then, now, and always.
10 years ago, on the 70th anniversary of D-Day, Russian President Vladimir Putin was still invited despite having just annexed Crimea, but not so this year. Instead, the president of the country he more recently invaded, Ukraine, was invited, and Biden was keen to underscore the importance of alliances in the Second World War and now.
What the Allies did together 80 years ago far surpassed anything we could have done on our own. It was a powerful illustration of how alliances, real alliances, make us stronger. A lesson that I pray we Americans never forget.
Now, some pundits knocked Biden for making the D-Day commemoration about Ukraine, but it's pretty clear that at least some veterans were right on board.
Being Prime Minister is busy fighting right now. No.
Oh, you're the savior of the people. Here's my eyes. Not a picture.
Yeah, you want a picture?
My hero.
No, you are our hero.
You're my hero. I pray for you.
I'm I'm not sure Zelensky was expecting that kind of reaction.
No, indeed. Biden also spoke at the Pointe du Hoc. That was the scene of a daring US Army Ranger attack on German guns that were defending the Normandy coastline, and where past presidents, including Ronald Reagan in 1984, retold the story of those heroic events. Some, though, including Conservative radio host Clay Travis, accused Biden of essentially plagiarising Ronald Reagan.
At last, the hour had come. Dawn, 6th of June, 1944.
At dawn on the morning of the 6th of June, 1944.
225 American Rangers arrived by ship, jumped into the waves and stormed the beach.
225 Rangers jumped off the British landing craft and ran to the bottom of these cliffs.
As well as obviously recounting the same events, it turns out the similarities with Reagan's speech, which was originally penned by Peggy Noonan in the 80s, were entirely intentional, a way of linking Biden to Reagan, who you remember back in 1984, he was at that time the oldest person ever to run for a second term as President of the United States. Before the speech was even given, Politico had been reporting that not only is Biden expected to echo Reagan in paying homage to these climactic battles for freedom and democracy, he will deliver remarks from where Reagan stood, on those iconic cliffs where the war was turned. There were plenty of differences between the two speeches as well, but like everything in America these days, Chaz, it was a pretty predictable political Rorschach test.
I've got another one of those political Rorschach tests for you, John, because online all anyone was talking about from the D-Day anniversary was this clip here, showing Biden supposedly stuck in an awful old person half squat. But this is another one of those clips where they cut the action suspiciously short to make Biden look terrible. Here's what really happened. Biden began sitting down, obviously realised he was sitting too early. He waited until Lloyd Austin was being announced before he then finished sitting.
Distinguished guests, please welcome the Honorable Lloyd J. Austin III, Secretary of Defense of the United States of America.
See, that looks better, doesn't it? Sure. There really isn't a lot there. If you want to criticise Biden for something super petty, but real, then maybe criticise him for blowing his nose, then almost eating it, then using the same tissue to wipe his eye. Blame him for that. Or maybe for being part of a ceremony that kept these ancient veterans out in the cold for so long that one of them sought refuge under a blanket. Poor guy, look at him.
You sure that's not Bernie Sanders under there? Well, after his remarks, Joe Biden's Twitter account was very keen to contrast this president's approach to veterans to that of his most recent predecessor.
He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured.
The video went on like that for about a minute, and President Trump can't deny a lot of that, just the bits that aren't literally on tape.
Obviously, I never said that dead soldiers are losers and suckers. Who would say such a thing? It was made up disinformation by radical left Democrats and Trump haters. Anytime you see that despicable fake statement used, remember that it comes from the fascist scum that is destroying our country.
So, did he say it? It was back in 2020 that The Atlantic's Jeffrey Goldberg first reported that Trump called dead American soldiers losers and suckers for getting killed. Trump also denied that at the time, but last year Trump's former chief of staff, General John Kelly, who went to the French cemetery in Trump's place, confirmed that Trump had repeatedly used that kind of language.
In a statement to CNN, Kelly confirms long-standing allegations that Trump called prisoners of war suckers. Kelly ends his statement with an ominous prayer: God help us if Trump wins.
And of course, John Kelly's own son was killed in combat. And just to make sure that nobody missed the point, Joe Biden then visited that same First World War cemetery that Trump had skipped in 2018, even though this visit was meant to be about World War II.
Yeah, for the record, John Bolton is also no fan of Trump's. He said that he never heard Trump refer to dead soldiers as losers and suckers. He said, I didn't hear that, although he did note, I'm not saying he didn't say it later in the day or another time, but I was there for that discussion. So do what you will with that.
A quick look at some polls before we go this week. And if there's been any impact from the Trump guilty verdict, so far it's looking pretty small. On the day that the jury convicted Donald Trump, he was leading Joe Biden in the 538 average of national polls by 1.7 percentage points. Now it is 1.1. Woo! Trump losing just 0.1%. Biden gaining half a point, but most of it, interestingly enough, is coming from Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Now to this week's economic news. May saw 272,000 new jobs, more than the Dow Jones estimate of about 190,000, yet the actual unemployment rate rose to 4%. The first time it's had a 4 in front of it since January 2022. Now, of course, Biden wanted to focus on that big jobs number in blue on the right there, but others wondered about what's going on with that unemployment rate going up, especially as the labour force actually shrunk by 250,000 workers. As it turned out, the number of people employed dropped by 408,000. Now, you might be wondering how that's even possible. Jobs going both up and down at the same time? Well, the jobs report actually has two different surveys. The survey with business data showed the big jobs increase, and the survey of workers showed the jobs dropping and the unemployment rate going up. So that's a bit confusing. That doesn't normally happen like that. But I think generally speaking, things are looking okay for unemployment. Just look at the labour force participation rate for 25 to 54s. That's at the highest it's been since 2002. But Trump had an altogether different critique.
Virtually 100% of the new jobs under Biden have also gone to illegal aliens. Did you know that? 100%. And you know, these people are so bad, they will correct me when I say 100%. 100% of the new jobs have gone to illegal aliens. Can you believe it?
Now, you probably can't believe it, but it's an interesting one, because while it's not true that all jobs have gone to illegal immigrants, it is true that they have all gone to migrants in total, both legal and illegal, and citizens who were born overseas. See, these are the job gains over the last 6 years or so for foreign-born workers, about 12% more jobs for them. But here are the job gains for US-born workers. Literally, they are where they were back in 2018. They haven't gone up at all. So what's going on there? Now, the first thing we should know is that US-born workers are actually doing okay. The US-born unemployment rate is 3.8%, and it's as low as it ever was under Trump. But is that because they've just dropped out of the labour force, because they're discouraged, they're not even looking for a job? Well, honestly, a little bit yes. The percentage of US-born people in the workforce never fully recovered after COVID, but it's not that much less than under Trump, just a tad less, that's all. Maybe a few people took an early retirement during COVID and they never came back. No, actually old people are participating in the workforce more than ever, by quite a long way. So this is all very strange. How is it possible that there have been 0 new jobs for US-born workers over the last 6 years, but US-born workers aren't short of a job? Maybe it's because there are fewer US-born people. And that's exactly what's happened. The US-born population has topped out. It's dropped 1 million people just in the last year. Wait till you see the US-born population that's working age. Not only did they top out a decade ago, but they've begun to drop fast. So of course US-born people aren't taking more jobs. There are less of them to take jobs. So what this means, John, is that the American economy is currently only expanding because of migration, and birth rates are falling further. So that's going to become even more the case in the future. So if Trump gets his way and those mass deportations begin, they might miss those foreign workers. Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, a lot of old baby boomers are going to have to start looking after themselves. But that's it for another trip to Planet America.
We're going to see you for a fireside chat on ABC News on Friday night, and back here at the same time next week, or anytime on ABC iView, YouTube and Facebook.
Bye-bye.